Thanks for joining us for our On the Yard edition of Impolite Conversation, where we explore race, culture, and societal issues through the lens of HBCU students. On the Yard happens every Friday.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm today's co-host, Nava. Today is Sunday, November 15th, and Joe Biden is president-elect. So we know that the Biden-Harris win was a historic one and was greatly supported by the Black vote. I just want to also mention the Caribbean vote as well.
That's right. That's right. We're Jamaican, so y'all haven't even started to see the Jamaican celebrations yet, the Caribbean celebrations.
But you know who else won? African-American culture. The two most influential women of any color that are associated with this historic campaign, Kamala Harris, who attended Howard University, and during her time there, she pledged and became a member of the Alpha chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, also known as AKA, as well as Stacey Abrams, my Spelman sister, who helped deliver the state of Georgia to the Biden-Harris ticket. Stacey Abrams was actually SGA president during her time at Spelman. And today, we're excited to chat about what the Biden-Harris wins means for African-American culture with an Alpha chapter, AKA, and Spelman College, SGA's immediate past president. I'll let you two introduce yourselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Davis. I am a current senior at Howard University studying marketing, originally from Dallas, Texas. And I'm a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Alpha Chapter. And I'm also serving as this year's 82nd Miss Howard University. So I'm super excited to be here and talk with you guys about this amazing moment in our history. So thank you for having me.
Hi, y'all. My name is Nia Page. I am the past student government president of Spelman College, Student Government Association. And I haven't said that in a while, so that came out really interesting.
Oh, okay.
But I graduated in 2020 from Spelman College as an international studies major. From there, I went on to work for the Biden campaign. I am the National African American Program Coordinator for the campaign. And additionally, I'm currently a student at Harvard University, part-time, getting my master's in international education policy.
Fabulous.
Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you for joining us.
Before we get into what the Biden-Harris ticket means for the culture, I'm curious to know what states you both voted in and what type of voting you guys participated in, whether that's early voting, vote by mail, voting on election day. Which did you guys do?
I voted in person in Georgia. I've been registered to vote in Atlanta, Georgia since my freshman year. And so I was really happy to vote in a state that became so critical to the election.
Absolutely.
I voted in Texas, and I did early voting in person and had an actually pretty pleasant experience. It was crazy the more I talked to people about like their experience voting and how they had to wait for hours. It just shows you how they can make voting super accessible when it's to communities that they want to have access to voting. So it's super interesting, but that was my experience voting this year.
This election season had an unprecedented voter turnout. According to many reports, this was the largest voter turnout in 120 years. According to Michael McDonald of the University of Florida, whose U.S. Elections Project tracks voter turnout, more than 160 million Americans voted, which represents 66.9% of the potentially eligible voting population. McDonald said this is the largest participation since 1900 and by far the biggest of the modern era. So this was just unprecedented. So Nava, you're a sophomore, so this is your first time voting. And Nia and Taylor, you would have been eligible to vote in at least 2 elections. So for the three of you, well, Nava, then you probably wouldn't notice a difference, but maybe you can still chime in. Did you notice a higher level of civic engagement among your peers during this time? And if so, what do you think drove this?
I think the level of engagement, honestly, in my town specifically, I feel like was the same. I think in terms of social media, there was a huge increase in just people being so vocal and being adamant about we cannot afford to not vote in this election. But it's weird because I grew up in a small suburb outside of Texas. And since we're virtual this year, I was here again for this election. And I feel like people keep quiet a lot about their political opinions. There's a few people who put signs in their yard, but I feel like for the most part, people try to keep that under wraps. Maybe they just don't want to be judged or don't want to feel like they conflict with people. But yeah, I think in terms of just what I observed, like going to the polls, it wasn't a huge difference, but definitely on social media, it was a much higher level of engagement and people being adamant about registering to vote and things like that.
What about you, Nia?
Yeah, I think every single election I've been in, because it's only been 3 so far, there's been really high stakes and it's really helped engage my youth base. So in the 2016 election, we saw Hillary Clinton running as the first female president, and then we saw Trump. So definitely at Spelman College, because I was the first year at Spelman, there were a lot of Spelman students who were involved. The Student Government Association at that time, led by Imani Dixon, who is amazing. She was absolutely incredible at Spelman College. She led a huge voting initiative and effort throughout all of campus and had, I don't even remember the numbers, but we had a large amount of Spelman students who were registered to vote. In the 2016 election, there's a lot of voter education that happened. You saw students talking about it in every single class, and we all, of course, thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. There were buses driving students to the polls. There was marches to the polls. So there was a lot of civic engagement in 2016 at Spelman College with people going to vote. And then in 2018, we saw once again an election that really personally resonated with Spelman students, and there was a lot of engagement, which was Stacey Abrams' election. There was Spelman Students for Stacey Abrams happening on campus. It was a huge group. Students were actively knocking on doors, making phone calls for Stacey Abrams. Everywhere you walked around campus during 2018, all you heard was Stacey Abrams. We looked at a Black woman running for governor, and we really felt like that personally connected with us. So a lot of students were voting. Morehouse students across all the AUCs saw a lot of engagement. And then Stacey Abrams became like a national figure. So that engagement continued on, which I love seeing. And then we get to this election, 2020. In November last year, that was when all the candidates came down to Atlanta, Georgia for the first debate, the Democratic candidates. So a lot of students were involved in that all week long. Candidates were coming to campus, talking to students. They were inviting students to all these different events. I met that week with Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Senator Harris, and Joe Biden. So 4 different candidates I met that week, which was absolutely wonderful. And so students were actively being engaged in this election because we saw the damage that Trump did, and we wanted something new to happen. So that was also really great to see. And I'm hoping that this continues on. I definitely think a reason that we were all engaged was that we saw something in the candidates that reflected us. So we saw women instead of the traditional white men, Hillary Clinton. And then we saw a Black woman in Stacey Abrams and an HBCU graduate. And then in this election, even though it took a bit because she was the vice president running mate, we still saw a Black woman. So I think seeing people who look like us and who identify with us really helped us be engaged and helped people my age be engaged.
So we did an episode in September with Andrea Haley, the CEO of Vote.org, and the SGA presidents from Florida A&M University and Texas Prairie View A&M, Xavier McClinton and Alana Gaskin. And they shared that some of the major concerns prior to the election were essentially that folks felt confused. Like, what's the difference between an absentee and a mail-in? Or do I need to request it? Or I registered to vote on my campus, but now due to COVID, I'm home. Do I request a mail-in ballot for my home address? Or do I just mail in where I attended school? Like, how do I vote? Help me. And so Andrea shared that making people confused is actually a voter suppression tactic. And during the last few election cycles, there has been a rise of digital voter suppression. Even with the historic voter turnout, there were, of course, people who did not exercise their right to vote. And this question is for all 3 of you. Did you have any friends, peers, whatever, that did not vote? And if so, what was their reason?
I had like 1 or 2 friends, maybe not like super close, but just like people I follow and interact with that vocalized that they weren't going to be voting, mainly just because a lack of trust in our system and just feeling like neither candidate is going to serve in the interest of Black people, and feeling what's the point in feeding into a system that wasn't built to ever work for me. And I think that's a valid concern. Like, I think it was best described. I was on a panel not that long ago with the HU College Democrats organization. There was someone on the panel who was like, it's not that the system is failing us or isn't working. It's working exactly as it was intended to work. It wasn't ever really intended to work for us. And I think there's some truth to that. But I do think that we still have to take on that responsibility. If you're not voting, that's your activism. What else beyond that are you doing to progress Black people and progress our society? And if you're not really doing anything else, then you should probably just vote and try to vote the right people, vote the right people into office who may recognize that the system is flawed in the same way that you recognize it's flawed and will work to try and reform it.
Well, Taylor is much more forgiving and patient than I am, because for me, at least, it's utterly incomprehensible for somebody to choose not to vote. I can't understand that at all. Like, even if you're voting for candidates I don't support, like, even if you did go vote for Donald Trump, which is horrifying to me, or maybe you voted for a third party or Green Party, no matter what, you should be voting. It's disrespectful to our ancestors for you not to vote when we fought for 100+ years for Black Americans to have the right to vote. And then beyond that, you're not only voting for a president, you're voting up and down the ballot. So you're voting for your local sheriff who chooses who gets arrested and how we enforce law enforcement. And you're voting for different laws to be passed in your state. Like, it's not only for president. So it just shows ignorance if you're choosing not to vote because you don't like the president. Okay, abstain from voting for the president, but vote for everybody else. I don't have much patience for people who say they're not going to vote. And even if you're saying you're not voting because of activism, it's...
You didn't have any friends that didn't vote, because if they even were thinking about it, you were like, don't talk to me.
Yeah, I didn't even engage in those conversations. A couple people tried me, and it did not happen because I don't understand why you would not. What were their reasons
when they tried you? What were they saying? The same similar thing the person on the panel that Taylor had mentioned?
Yeah, so they were... I would not say that they were friends. They were people I was engaging with.
You're like, let's make it clear. I'm not friends with these people.
Yeah, and when they try to say that, they would bring up these things that you've been hearing again and again that Twitter perpetuates. I love Black Twitter. I stand for Black Twitter. But sometimes we have very false narratives, like this thing that Senator Harris was locking up Black people. It's just like Senator Harris built incredible programs in California that helped turn around. She convicted less people for marijuana while she was Attorney General. She did all these incredible things. And yet we just want to keep on focusing and harping on that she is arresting Black people, which was completely over-exaggerated. And then with Joe Biden, the crime bill. During the crime bill, it wasn't only Joe Biden who supported the crime bill. It was congressmen, it was the Congressional Black Caucus that supported the crime bill. It was Black reverends and pastors all throughout the country support the crime bill. And yet we want to blame every single thing for the crime bill on Joe Biden as well. And it's just like these narratives that we perpetuate were the reasons people are saying they're not going to vote. And it's like, okay, if you actually did your research, if you actually looked up what Senator Harris did as Attorney General, and she did incredible things as Attorney General, and if you actually looked up the crime bill, you know that all these things are just kind of like Twitter taglines that we just want to retweet again and again without actually doing our own research. So that was the reasons they said, and usually ended the conversations there because there's no reason to beat a dead horse. We had this amazing app that anybody in the campaign could download called the Vote Joe app. And so in the Vote Joe app, you could put in the full name of anybody in your contacts and their number, and then you could see the voting record. So even my friends who I could go up and see if they voted in the 2016 election and 2018 midterms, if they didn't, I was like texting my friends. I'm like, hey, we haven't talked in 2 years, but are you voting? I saw you didn't vote in 2018, but just reminding you, I need you to vote 2020. So all my friends responded to me and they told me that they were voting. I think they thought I was a little bit stalkerish, but I was really dedicated to people voting.
It's almost like at some point it's less about you actually feel that way and more about you repeating. And definitely to Taylor's point, people who said they weren't going to vote, not necessarily because they feel like the hood is the hood, but with more of the background of saying the president isn't going to actively change my life, maybe my neighbor's life. And I feel like, in most cases that's true, but it's COVID, honey. Yes, he is.
And then also the local elections too, like the down ballot.
You should also be voting for your board of education. Like, you should be voting for all those things. The most voter turnout only ever happens during the presidential election, which I think perpetuates the idea that, one, the presidency is the only office to ever exist in the entire universe. And when you have it, you're the king of everything. And you make all the decisions ever in life. The president feels this way too, by the way.
This president does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People, I feel like, also feel that way because the most turnout is for the presidential election. People feel like that doesn't really matter, but like when stuff is happening, them potholes you driving over, like that's not the president. That's those people who you just decided not to decide, oh, let me just not go and vote. But, oh, I see those signs up. Is somebody running for something? And I definitely feel like because I voted by mail, it's so easy to just have them sent to your house. And when you do, you're kind of like, okay, well, let me do my little research right now. And then it's finished. Because I definitely feel like if I had to always go to the poll, I would definitely forget, oh, I have this going on, I have that going on. So I definitely think that, yes, mail-in voting was huge this year because of many different reasons. But I also feel like it's a good way to get more people to participate in voting just on a regular basis. But we know Biden beat Trump and Georgia went blue. And actually, this is the first time Georgia has gone blue in 30 years. The last time Georgia was Democratic in the presidential race was 1992, when Bill Clinton beat George H.W. Bush. And in 2018, Stacey Abrams ran against Brian Kemp, then Georgia's Secretary of State, for governor, and lost by fewer than 55,000 votes. That seems like a big number, but you have to think about the size of the actual population. Many believe she lost because of racially motivated voter suppression. And I remember around the time when she was running and feeling like that's not fair. So subsequent to that loss, Stacey Abrams founded Fair Fight to combat voter suppression. And Fair Fight raised $32 million, and it donated that money to various Democratic campaigns to improve voter registration and grassroots efforts. Since 2018, the organization has been able to register 800,000 new voters in Georgia, most of whom are under the age of 30, some 49% people of color. Most experts say Stacey Abrams, a Black woman and a Spelman grad, which GOP stronghold into a blue state. Obviously, we had a bison on the ticket. CNN, MSNBC talking about HBCUs is a huge deal. And my mom, who's obviously an HBCU grad, we go to the same school, mentioned to my sister and I that this was the first time she had heard, major news outlets talking about HBCUs. So, Nia, in your role for the Biden campaign, you helped to engage the HBCU turnout, and you and Taylor actually worked together on this. Is that right?
Taylor joined us for 2 incredible events. I started with the campaign as a national HBCU co-chair. So I was the first co-chair. I worked with 2 people in the campaign starting in November of 2019 to build the HBCU program. And then we launched the HBCU program in January of 2020. And I, with Simone Sanders and William Fairfax, another co-chair, did a bus tour in South Carolina where we went to all the HBCUs there and talked about the HBCU Students for Biden program, which had a huge comprehensive policy in which Joe Biden was going to give over $70 billion to minority-serving institutions and HBCUs. So it was absolutely incredible. And he had a lot of other policies around retention of HBCUs, ensuring that HBCUs are well-funded and that we have great professors. From there, I've been working with the campaign since then, and then I got my position as a national program coordinator for the African-American program in the campaign. And so I continue working with HBCUs in that program. And we had the National HBCU Homecoming Week, which reached over 800,000 people. And it ended with a large HBCU homecoming rally in which Tiffany Haddish was the host. We had some really incredible other people who were involved in that rally. And so Taylor was a part of our HBCU homecoming week. She did an event with Campus Queens. And so Angela Robson, former Miss Florida A&M, and a HBCU graduate and an actress now, was a part of it, as well as Taylor Davis and a couple other HBCU Campus Queens. So that's where we worked with then. And then we also did another event with Terrence J for our On the Yard programming, which was the campaign's weekly HBCU and Black Students for Biden programming. So it was really great, and I loved working with Taylor in those programs.
I've never seen this type of engagement with HBCUs. Like, how did this come about? Why did Biden all of a sudden say, hey, let's make sure we're engaging HBCUs? I'm curious.
It actually came about in November when all the candidates were coming to campus and came to Atlanta for the debates. I started interacting with the candidates, and I started reaching out to different candidates to see what they're doing with HBCU students. And I reached out to the Biden campaign because I really felt strong about the Biden campaign. And then even though I love Senator Harris, I absolutely adored her, I felt like Biden had the very best chance of beating Trump. And so I reached out to the Biden campaign and I was like, do you have an HBCU program? I reached out to the National Students for Biden director of the campaign, Lubna Sebastian, who was incredible. We've been working together since then. But I asked her if she has an HBCU program and if the campaign has a way to target all the HBCUs. And she was like, no, but that's a good idea. Let's talk about it. So then I got on the phone with Lubna and Vince Evans. Yeah, it was really great. I got on the phone with Lubna a week later. Then I got in Vince Evans as well. Vincent Evans is a Florida A&M graduate, so another HBCU graduate, and he is now Senator Harris's national political director. So throughout the campaign, he has been in charge of everything, basically, Senator Harris, and he's utterly amazing. And so we talked for a while about building this HBCU program. And so then the campaign developed policies, and then we started developing this program, and then we launched in January. And then from January, after we did our in-person bus tour with HBCUs, we then moved on to virtual programming that I was mostly leading, as well with the co-chair, William Fairfax, and then our other 2 co-chairs. And we just kept it going since then. And then when I became program coordinator on the African-American team, I took a larger role in leading the HBCU program, which is where we got our National HBCU Homecoming Week and some of the other really big events that we did with our program. But yeah, I started it back in November.
You did that. That's amazing. I am so excited for that. I hope that continues.
I hope it does too.
I'm curious. I don't remember this, but I may not have been paying attention. And this is for Nia and Taylor, because you were both in college during the Clinton campaign. Were you both in college?
I was in high school.
Okay,
my senior year. Mm-hmm.
Did the Clinton Kane ticket pay attention to HBCUs, or is this like the first time we're seeing this? This is the first time I'm noticing it.
The Hillary campaign, they did go visit HBCUs. In her last few months of campaigning, I think it was she visited 10 HBCUs. She was going to HBCUs for rallies and to hold events. You saw engagement with HBCUs, but not to the extent that we're engaging with HBCUs. So we're going to HBCUs not only to use their venue and spaces. The campaign went to Texas Southern University multiple times.
Because there's so many HBCUs in Texas with the name Texas in it.
Yeah, exactly. The campaign also went to Florida A&M, and they had a meet and greet with HBCU students there. And then obviously Joe Biden spoke at Delaware, the HBCU, and he engaged with the students there as well. So you saw, not only were they going to HBCUs to speak, but they're also incorporating students into the programming. And so when Senator Harris came to Atlanta, Georgia last month, which was a part of HBCU Homecoming Week, she engaged with HBCUs when she went to Morehouse College. And then Senator Harris did a surprise meet and greet for AUC students. But yeah, both campaigns worked with HBCUs. I definitely think our campaign has done a lot more work with HBCUs.
Okay. I'd love to see it.
I think that had a lot to do with Kamala Harris and how her whole community was rallying behind her, not just Howard. I think a lot of HBCUs felt seen on the ticket, much in the way that many Black people felt seen when Barack Obama was elected. Do you guys feel like that makes sense?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It was the best decision I've ever made, just choosing an HBCU. And I think it's so great that now that we have an HBCU alum who is the vice president-elect, it'll prompt people to at least just start to learn more and be enticed by what that experience might be able to do for them. Because you can hear people say all the time, oh, I love my HBCU, this, that, and the third. But to see it real time, what it could potentially do for you, then maybe they'll start to realize, oh, there are a lot of really talented, successful people that I admire that actually did attend an HBCU. So I think it's just so amazing to be able to put on a platform this big why an HBCU education is something you should invest in.
I think it was a combination of Kamala Harris being on the ticket. Also, Nia Page, your amazing, foresight to get that done. But also, as well as Stacey Abrams being one of the names on the VP shortlist. Her name was being floated around as a part of the shortlist. And she's a rising star in the Democratic Party. And because of the work that she had done during the gubernatorial race and with Fair Fight, people know her and know that she went to Spelman, and just people trying to understand, why are all these Black people rallying behind her? It's not just that she's Black. So I think that media outlets and just mainstream society in general, having to come up to speed with what is an HBCU, and not just as an institution where people attend college, but understanding culturally what it means and why all HBCUs kind of rally behind the ticket. Additionally, in 2019, when Senator Harris was a rumored presidential hopeful, she hosted a book event, which had been reported at the time as a soft launch for her campaign. And Washington Post reporter Chelsea Janes, who was covering the event, tweeted of Harris, "Members of her Howard sorority are in the room and screeched when she mentioned her time there. Did not expect to hear screeches here." So after being categorically dragged by Black Twitter, she apologized. But then in October, this same reporter wrote an article for the Washington Post that began by saying, "Shortly after Senator Kamala D. Harris became Joe Biden's running mate, the Democratic National Committee began receiving thousands of donations in the precise amount of $19.08 without any obvious explanation." Now, when I read that, I was thinking, obvious to who? Because it's obvious for anyone who has any cultural competence with the significance of Black Greek letter organizations that it's emblematic of the founding year of her sorority. For example, I'm a Delta. We did Monday's episode with my line sister, and we were just talking about how all Black Greek letter organizations rallied behind Kamala Harris because they felt seen. And what's so crazy to me is how oblivious the Democratic Party has been to the power of Black Greek letter organizations. Oh, Black people have organizations that they're already civically engaged. Like, we can actually tap into this, like, duh. You know what I mean? It's like, it's such an untapped resource. I do think that HBCUs are going to become a little bit more a part of mainstream political discussion and the impact of it. And campaigns are going to have to start understanding the power of it. What do you think about that as it relates to like BGLOs and Divine Nine and just like mainstream society even understanding what these acronyms mean and what these terms mean? Do you think that there's going to be more of a cultural awareness around these things?
Absolutely. Because I think that people are going to start getting called out more for just being ignorant. I mean, for the same reporter, because when you brought up like the book, I was like, oh, I already know what she's about to say, the screeching fiasco. But to know that after that happened, she didn't even feel like it was necessary to just look up what this organization even is. If you look up the organization, you'll know that 1908 is significant. To just be so dismissive of culture that you feel like I don't have anything to do with what Black folk have going on. You just don't want to do like the bare minimum of just being familiar. This is someone who at that point she should have recognized was going to be a very public face just within the political realm. And obviously she's so closely tied to Howard and to AKA. The fact that you don't do your diligence as a reporter to, but it's like, what, is there any system in place that would really even require her to be accountable for being diligent in that regard? Because a lot of people don't think that's an important part of contemporary society and culture, even though we take from Black culture all the time and make those things super mainstream and pretend like it, wasn't a Black thing. I don't know. It's at some point it's like infuriating that you can, as a reporter, get away with just genuinely being ignorant.
So to add on to that, part of my role as the African-American program coordinator for the campaign, we had an organization called Team Unity. So the campaign was made by our absolutely incredible African-American advisor, Ajua, and who was also working with the campaign. And so Team Unity incorporated all of the Divine Nine Black Greek letter organizations. So throughout the campaign, Joe Biden made Happy Founder Days messages for every single organization, which was amazing. That started last year. And so he did all of them. And then Senator Harris did an event with members of the Divine Nine community. So we had over 300,000 people who virtually attended this event. And it was one of our most attended events. And we only had about 3 days to promote it just because a lot of other things were happening with the campaign. And people still completely turned out for that. And we made incredible amounts of donations. And then right after that event, we had a Divine Nine phone bank. And the phone bank had a couple thousand people who just went from the event to attend the phone bank. So we see that the Black Greek letter organizations are being very active with the campaign, which was absolutely amazing. And Joe Biden has said publicly and openly that he's going to continue to work with them throughout his time in the administration. And Joe Biden himself knows all these organizations. He knows what they do, and he's really excited about them. He asks about them. So I definitely think now it's become more mainstream and that these reporters, they don't have an excuse to be ignorant, because if the president of the United States, who's a white male, knows about Black Greek letter organizations and who's actively engaging with them and talking with them, then some reporters need to know about this as well.
I was going to say the AKAs had their shirts ready.
People already have Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking, already on shirts.
No, like really. I remember one of my friends, she posted her mom, and I was like, didn't they just say that? She was like, no, she was just ready. And
I think that just like in general, we know what white Greek culture is. We've been forced to know it through popular culture, through movies, through television shows like frat houses and this and that. But like, it is time that mainstream culture start understanding what Black Greek culture is, period. Understand what it means, how it's different.
Please be the same people that hop in line when people are strolling and just be like, oh, let me thank you. Like, same kind of vein. Do you ever feel like you find yourself being asked about why you chose to go to school, where you went to school, in a way that you feel like you are being made to defend your decision to attend or have attended an HBCU?
Oh, yeah, all the time. My senior year, the summer before I left, I worked at American Eagle. So I was like at the register and I would just be striking up conversations with people. They would ask my plans after high school. And for most people just didn't really know what Howard was. But even it would be a lot of like Black people who would be like, oh, really? Like you're going to
you
a
were going to say that. The Black people.
Yeah, they'd be like, really? Like, over LSU, you want to go to? Yeah. And they would say things like, oh, the real world is not going to be predominantly Black. Favorite thing to say. Literally, like, what the real world, why is nothing real unless there's whiteness to validate your space is my thing. But a lot of times people are just manipulated by what they see or what they hear, or just not exposed to the right thing. So they don't even realize that they're taking part in these narratives that are dangerous to our community. But definitely, to answer your question, all the time, I feel like I'm always having to defend why an HBCU education is just as valid. And it'll just be people unprovoked. Oh, yeah. Like, I didn't even ask. Just unprovoked. Just want to give their opinion on why HBCUs. You know, if you want to make the argument that an HBCU education is no better than any other education, okay, you're wrong. But you can you can say that. When people just genuinely want to like devalue what HBCUs do, the proof is in the pudding. So yeah, definitely all the time. I feel like I'm on the defense.
Data is there. You can't you can't tell people who make no sense logic. You can't give them numbers. How about you, Nia?
I went to predominantly white high school in Cincinnati, Ohio. There was only me and one other Black girl in the entire class. It was actually one of my best friends to today. But at that school, when I said I'm going to go to Spelman College and HBCU, and I was applying to HBCUs, even the college council was like, you sure you want to apply to HBCU? Yeah, it was a lot. And this other student who ended up going to Tuskegee, who was a close family friend of ours, he had the same thing, but his mother came to school and said, he's applying to Tuskegee, only Tuskegee, and y'all going to help him get into Tuskegee. So his entire family went to Tuskegee. He was generational for Tuskegee. But yeah, so it was a little bit unsettling and annoying. But at that point, I went through 4 years at that school of racism and institutionalized racism and biases and utter insanity. And so I was done with their opinions by then. But then it's like, when you go out, even now, since I am attending Harvard now, people are like, you're going to Harvard, wow. But then it's like, okay, but I graduated from Spelman College. Like I always say, like Spelman graduate, and then it's Harvard's on the side, but Spelman is number one. It's like Spelman was an institution that changed me, that molded me into who I am today, and that made me into basically everything. And so it's always going to be Spelman for me. Spelman's incredibly more just connected. You have that international alumni community wherever you go, which I love. I went to Hangzhou, China to teach. And I was getting off the plane in Shanghai, and this was my first time going alone to China. And so I was all alone in the airport. There was nobody who looked like me. Most people were Asian, and then there was a couple white people. And all of a sudden, and I was wearing my Spelman shirt, somebody barges into me, hugging me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm being attacked out of nowhere. It was this beautiful Black woman, and she's, oh my gosh, my Spelman sister. And it was just like an immediate connection across the world, all the way in China, in which she was like singling me out as her Spelman sister just because of the shirt I was wearing. And like that connection, you're not going to get anywhere else. Nobody from Harvard's going to see me in a Harvard shirt and run up and hug me.
Exactly.
But Spelman, like, it's taboo to go to an airport without any HBCU gear on there. Like, I never travel without something that says Spelman on it. All I have to say is, like, going to HBCU is an exceptional experience, and nothing can undermine that. And so you'll always have these people who are ignorant and who are saying, you could get into Yale, so why are you going to Spelman? I'm like, I'm going to Spelman so I can be in a place that accepts me, that helps me build, and that doesn't belittle and put me down, because the real world, it's not all white. It's controlled by predominantly white people. I want to be in a place that's safe and that's going to help build me up. So I love it. I haven't really experienced too much of it just because of places I put myself in. I have little patience for certain things, so I don't really choose to associate with people who don't respect my HBCUs. With the campaign, there are a lot of HBCU people in the campaign and I love it. Almost like half the Black staffers graduate from HBCU. So my HBCU experience was always respected. America's not predominantly white, so why should I be in a predominantly white space?
I also think it's important to note that when you say, oh, you went to Spelman, I feel like it means something a little bit different. In the same way you would say, oh, I went to this school, I went to that school. But when you're talking about any HBCU, it means something completely different than even saying that you went to an Ivy League. It's almost like when you hear a luxury brand and you're like, oh, okay, but they could be making like a cardboard box. Like, you never know what these people are putting out. And you just feel like the name makes you, when really you're a part of something a lot bigger when you attend an HBCU.
People definitely have a just misconstrued outlook on like why people are so proud to have gone to an HBCU or to be attending an HBCU. It shows, because I remember freshman year, we were like reading this article in our English class about some like Black student organization, I believe on LSU's campus, that was talking about how they foster a HBCU like experience on their campus.
One more time,
We surrounded ourselves with only Black people on the campus. Like, I only talk to Black people on the campus. Oh, we like stroll. We listen to this music
that
together.
Literally makes
we
my
have
head
soul
hurt.
food together.
That
If that's
really
what y'all
makes my
think.
head hurt.
Yes, like soul food. That's what you think is special about an HBCU experience. We have Soul Food Thursdays. Like, that's not at all what the true value in going to an HBCU is. I've learned so much just about Black people, learn how diverse we are and our contributions to society. And I feel like it's genuinely made me whole. And once you develop that sense of self, you understand why it's important to be proud. It gives you this sense of purpose. It gives you this whole new outlook on life that you just cannot get at a predominantly white institution. You can't duplicate that anywhere else or mimic any type of experience just by, only associating yourself with Black people at a predominantly white school. I feel like a lot of people just think that the HBCU experience is like swag surfing, and that's not at all what it is.
That's actually one of the reasons why I started this particular aspect of the podcast, because I do think people look at homecoming and they're like, oh, Black schools. Okay, yes, this is an aspect of HBCU culture, but homecoming is 1 week a year. I wanted people to understand all of the amazing things that HBCU students have to offer and talk about, other than just, I don't know, homecoming and stepping in the cafeteria, whatever it is people think is happening every single day.
Right.
And I said this before, and I'm going to say it again. People are like, oh, Lord, you are not going to be able to hear the end of it from Howard grads. No, you're not going to be able to hear the end of it from all HBCU students, grads forever. Kamala Harris is the first vice president woman of any color. She is the first woman of any color. So Stanford didn't do that. MIT didn't do that. Harvard didn't do that. Wellesley didn't do that. What did that? An HBCU. And that is forever. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's. So, Nava, I know you have some closing remarks about the Georgia election.
Yeah, so moving a little bit back to the election, since it's not actually over yet, since there's the runoff, Raphael Warnock, Morehouse grad, as well as John Ossoff. There are two Democratic candidates, and they will determine whether or not the Democrats control the Senate, which we want. Already have the House. And if Biden and Harris are going to get anything done so that they need. So if you live in Georgia, request your mail-in ballot for the January 5th runoff. We need that same enthusiasm in this really crucial runoff as we had in the presidential race, because all elections are important. So I want to thank you guys for joining us. As you know, the podcast is curated by the Iconoclast Dinner Experience. And the last question that we ask all of our guests is, it's your last night on Earth, where are you eating? And this can be as specific or as general as you want.
In the spirit of everything we discussed today, my last meal is going to be in the caf. We're in Punch Out. We have a cute little spot on campus where it's always every first Friday of the month, we have a First Friday celebration. It's like a DJ in there. People are dancing, having fun. So I think that would be a great way to go out. Even though that sounds morbid, that would be a good way.
I've lived in a lot of different states. I lived in 7 different states. But the place I consider home, I didn't even live there, is Indianapolis, Indiana, and that's where all my family is in. So I would eat in Indianapolis with my family. When we used to live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and could easily go back and forth between Indiana, and when there wasn't COVID, we'd have large family dinners every single Sunday that had like 70 plus people, and they're all first family because our family's huge. And yeah, I have a lot of first cousins and aunts and uncles.
Thank you for listening to Impolite Conversation, the podcast, curated by the Iconoclast Dinner Experience. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Icon Dinner, and on the Iconoclast Dinner Experience Facebook page. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Hit us on socials or send us feedback at press@iconoclastdinner.com. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to our podcast, and we'd also love it if you rated and reviewed us.